So initially you have been discussing from the beginning, introduction, then job analysis, job designing, all these stuff. Then after that, we have to uh, think about or talk about HR planning, right? So once basically initially the basic. So from which HR function that HR which functions the HR functions out of the all HR functions, which one is the first function? I'm asking from you. So the first one is job designing. Then after that, so we need to create jobs first in an organization. If you take an organization, we need to create first job. First, initially, what we need to do is to create jobs, right? So creating jobs simply technically known as job designing, right? So then after that, once jobs created, so job analysis need to be done, right? So job description, job specifications need to be created for each jobs created. Then after that, what we need to do? So then we need to plan the human resources. The third important HR function is human resource planning, right? So this is the point, or this is the topic that we are going to discuss today. Right. So before starting, we need to think about the background, or a background about HR planning. So why we need, right? So basically think about your school. So what were the changes in the teacher staff? So in a school, what will happen? What changes that will occur, that normally occurs, right? So was there any transfers, resignations, promotions, retirements? We have some teachers, annually after 5 years time, so they are supposed to transfer, right? So they transfers from one school to another school according to government regulations. There may be some resignations, and also sometimes teachers are promoted, right? And also at the same time, some people may retire, some teachers may retire, right? Uh, so all these due to this, what happens? Staff cadre happened to reduce. Cadre means the number of positions available in the school may be reduced due to a transfer. For example, your chemistry taught teacher is transferred to another school, and maybe your vice principal, or maybe Sinhala taught teacher in the primary section maybe resign due to her family commitments, or maybe a business studies taught teacher may be promoted as the vice principal. So then there is no one to teach business studies. Once in case of transfers, once the chemistry teacher transferred to another school, in that case, in this school, in our school that we are talking about, having a vacancy for teaching chemistry, right? So due to resignations, there may be vacancies. Due to retirements, there may be vacancies. Due to all of these transfers, resignations, promotions, retirements, basically vacancies arise. We have vacancies due to this. And cadre may be reduced, happen to get reduced. On the other hand, sometimes a government asks the school to increase the number of students. For example, we have classes, 7 classes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And government says we need to, the school need to add one more class. So adding one more class needs another teacher. For example, if there are 13 subjects, maybe sometimes 13 teachers will be needed, right? So when in case of increasing expansions, vacancies again arise. Vacancies maybe we have vacancies. So in order to vacancies can we need vacancies. Vacancies created, right? So in order to meet this, principal has to make a plan. The number of teachers availability. Sometimes we don't know how many employees will be resigned in the near future. We don't know, sometimes we don't know how many teachers will be transferred, and we don't know maybe sometimes how many teachers promoted, right? So we can assume that due to the based on the, we can estimate the retirements, right? So we have a profile, employee profile database. In that case, we can simply assess, we can estimate how many retirements are subjected to the next month, how many retirements will be there in the let's say in the uh, 2 months ahead, as of 30th December, for example. So then in that case, principal have a rough estimate. Number of retirements for next month is 10. Then we need 10 more teachers. Then how we determine the resignations? So we can't predict. To some extent, we can predict promotions, right? By looking at the database. So we can estimate number of promotions that may be given by the as of next December, coming December, right? So transfers again, according to government circulars, those who completed 5 years period are subjected to transfer. So then in that case, we can estimate. Sometimes we have sudden deaths, right? Sudden deaths. So in that case, again, we have vacancies. Then we need to consider all these number of factors. We need to consider that cause to be a vacancy, right? Number of factors that cause to have a vacancy need to be considered. Then they must be estimated. And those estimations are known as HR plan, right? So in order to meet these vacancies, the principal has to make a plan. Otherwise, let's say suddenly a teacher's death cost, then principal need to function the school smoothly, even the sudden death cost, right? Maybe sometimes due to these current situations, 10 teachers resign from their post and have already decided to migrate, for example. So in that case, how the school functions? So principal may be responsible for that. In that case, how he runs the school, right? So he must have a proper plan in order to have the uh, smooth functioning. So the same scenario applied to the any organization. So since you all have employed, maybe sometimes we have HR managers here, right? So basically, so we need to, as employees, as the managers, we need to run the organization smoothly. In order to run our organization, in order to have the smooth functioning of our organizational activities, we need to have the people at the right place, right time, for the right positions, right? So we need to have people for the right time, for the right place, right? So therefore, with right attitudes, with right qualifications, right? So this is simply known as HR planning, right? Uh, so the definition is HR planning, how we define it. The process by which an organization ensures that it has the right number of people. Any point of time, the HR manager need to make sure the organization having right number of people. to meet all the demands of all the demands, or all the jobs get done, all the work demands get done through people, right? And the right kind of people. What is right kind of people? Right kind of people simply means that the qualities. Here, the quantity. Right number is the quantity. Right kind is the quality. What is quality? Quality is the right knowledge, skills, and attitudes and other characteristics which are required to get the things done. For example, to be a lecturer, what qualities that he or she must have, right? So to be a bank manager, what knowledge, skills, attitudes, and other characteristics that he or she must have. So quality is basically right number and the right quantity. Sorry, right quantity and the right quality. At the right place, at the right time. Right time means soon after the vacancy exists, there must be a mechanism to replace another employee at the right time. So let's say, for example, I'm submitting my resignation letter today. After with effect from after 3 months from today, I'm going to resign. So then immediately tomorrow itself, I must have a plan to replace another employee for that. We can't wait for months and months, right? So if we are waiting months and months, in that case, we are not very good HR manager. So we must have a mechanism. So that mechanism is known as HR plan. Right. So we have other definitions. Just look at the first one. I think the simplest one is the first one. So by taking into consideration about these two definitions, so we can simply make a complete definition. We can simply define the term by our own words. The process of getting right number of qualified people to the right job at the right time. So this is our own definition, right? So getting right number of people. Right number is the right quantity. Qualified people, right quality, right job at the right time. Right. So definition suggests that. So in the HR planning, what we need to do, what we are doing. So what we are doing is determining HR needs. How many people that will be needed? How many people that we need in the last for the last 5 years? For the coming 5 years. Right? How many people will be needed for the coming 5 years or maybe 10 years. Normally, we are planning for 5 years time. Normally, so we need to estimate how many people will be needed for coming 5 years. Right quantity, not only the heads, number of heads, but also their qualities. Right quantity is the number, and the right quality means the kind, simply knowledge, skills, and attitudes, their qualification, right? So right number of people with right qualities, with the right qualifications, which are suited for performing their day-to-day job activities, right? So all the people what we need must meet the right qualification. So we need to determine that. Right? So in that definition, the basic point highlights that we need to determine human resource needs. Needs in the sense that quantity plus quality. And HR plan must have an inventory of present HR. What is an inventory? Inventory means stock. In the stock, what we maintain. Right? So basically, we need to have a profile. Employee profile database of the present staff, present HR. Present means currently we are having. So current employees profile or database need to be maintained. Basically, right? Their name, designation, age, their interests, their qualifications, right? Their family informations, their residence information, addresses, right? Their electorate, uh, and their blood group, health conditions, right? All the things need to be maintained. Their birth date, right? So profile need to be maintained, and their job responsibilities, job duties, KPIs given, key performance indicators given, performance informations, right? So all these need to be maintained, right? So includes an inventory of present HR, current employees database need to be maintained. So that suggested, that is suggested by this definition. And assess the future requirements of HR. We need to assess, estimate while determining the HR needs. I'm talking about the first bullet point, and the third bullet point, how it relates to the third bullet point. Assess the future requirements. We need to estimate, we need to have, because we can't predict future. We can't exactly predict future. So in that case, we need to estimate the future requirements using the past data. Using the past data. Let's say, for example, last 10 years, we have sudden deaths, let's say 10 sudden deaths due to the last during the last 5 years, right? So the pattern, last 20 years, last 50 years, each year one death has occurred, caused. So you simply go to the past data and find that during the last 50 years, each year you find that 50 people have uh, already died due to a sudden cases, right? So in that case, you can simply estimate for the last 5 years nearly, based on the past data, you can roughly estimate there will be 5 deaths, right? Estimate. You forecast, right? So then you need to have 5 more employees more to replace that. You need to have a prediction, because sudden, based on the past data, there will be 5 deaths according to the past pattern of the data, past trend. And let's say due to resignation, last 5 years, last 20 years, each, let's say the data, past data reveal that 20 resignations have caused due to the, again, the same pattern maintained. Let's say one resignation for a year, or let's say 5 resignations for an year. So in that case, 5 years, 5 multiplied by 5, 25 people need to be maintained additionally, right? So rather than just recruiting them, you need to have a mechanism to replace by any way, right? HR manager need to think about those things. Then, so based on that, you need to assess the future requirements. So let's say, for example, you are planning according to your strategic plan. Let's say you are going to open a new branch in India, or let's say you are going to, let's say, open a new plant, another product. You are going to launch a new product, right? In the coming 5 years. In that, for that, you need more people. So that for that different business segment, right? So these are the examples to assess the future requirements. Right. So most focus not only on people, but also on working conditions and the relationships. Sorry, must focus not only on people, but also on working conditions and relationships. You need to think about not only the number of people, number and the quality, but also the working conditions and the relationships. What type of a salary is given, what type of a working condition is given, and what are the terms and conditions, whether they must be recruited outsourcing, or whether they must be recruiting on permanent full-time basis, or whether they must be recruited from contracting out, right? So there are so many ways of hiring employees, right? So whether they must be recruited, let's say we need 50 people to let's say to meet our demands in the coming 5 months. 50 people needed. So then 50 jobs are being vacant. In that case, we need to determine how those 50 people need to be replaced. 50 vacancies are replaced, right? So there are various mechanisms rather than just only going for permanent full-time employment contracts. So there are various ways. So we need to, as HR manager, must know these things, the ways of hiring or ways of getting things done, right? So we can use of them. And also the ways how, let's say, how we recruit them, how we select them, how we compensate them, how we evaluate their performance, and what are the terms and how they need to be reported, and what is the location, job locations, how they need to be performed, and which way of performance that they need to engage. Right? So all these are working conditions and relationship, and to whom these new employees to report, who are the immediate supervisors, right? So you need to think about those things in HR plan. So those who are going to be recruited to fill the vacancies, and so you need to think about basically working conditions and the relationships. Right. So objectives of human resource planning. What are the objectives? The first objective is to prepare the organization to have the right employees for the right jobs at the right time, so that organizational objectives are met. So our main objective is to maintain, or is to have smooth functioning of operation. No interruptions are expected due to the cadre reduction, due to the vacancies. We can't stop our work due to the vacancies, right? So we need to maintain the business, or we need to maintain the smooth functionality of the business over time. So therefore, main objective is to have a plan, is to have a mechanism that ensures the right that ensures that we are having the right number of people for the right jobs at the right time. Right. So the second one is to ensure that the organization makes the best use of its human resources, because there won't be any redundancies, extra idle work. So for example, think about government organizations. How many people are being redundant? How many people are not taking only the salaries but not contributing anymore, worth for getting the salary, worth for how much they are getting, right? So therefore, that's simply known as the redundancy, idle working, idleness. They are being idle. They are not, even though they are employed, they are not contributing, right? So they physically in, but mentally and uh, uh, emotionally, mentally, they are totally out. They are not contributing. So therefore, uh, so when we have a plan, because plan ensures basically meeting the number of people and the quality of the people to the demand only. We supply, there must be a balance to the demand, and basically there is an HR imbalance. There won't be an HR imbalance. There won't be any HR imbalance. Imbalance in the sense that there must be a balance. Balance in the sense that people needed must be supplied. The demand of people need to be properly supplied. So demand and supply need to be balanced. So we need 50 people and we have 50 people. We need 100 people for the next month, and we ensure that we will have 100 people for the next month. So we are having 100 people. So there is no imbalance. There is a balance, right? No excess, no shortage, right? So when there is an excess, cost for the organization. When there is a shortage of employees, there will be a cost for the organization, because in order to meet the business needs, we don't have people, right? So we lose business since we are having since we are not having sufficient number of employees, we lose businesses. The opposite of that, when we are having more people, excess people, we need to pay more salaries without having sufficient businesses. So then again, cost. Excess is a cost and shortage is a cost. When we have a balance of people, then we can maintain properly, maintain the employees properly, and we can have the business functionality smoothly. So to ensure that the organization makes the best use of its human resource is the other objective. And should receive maximum benefit from HR. Maximum benefit. That's how we can get. And is able to anticipate the problems or potential surpluses or deficits of people. So when we have a right plan, so you always estimate, when you take a certain point of time, you estimate the number of people demanded and the number of people supplied. Let's say when you have a very good HR plan, at a certain point of time, you can predict, you can estimate the number of people demanded, required, and number of people supplied to meet that requirement, to demand, in other words, right? So then obviously we can estimate, we can anticipate, in other words, potential problems of deficit to surpluses. Let's say for the next, for the coming December, according to our estimate, we need 500 people. But we are having, due to this crisis and sudden migrations, we will have only 400 people. So then there is a 100 people shortage. So then we must have a mechanism to replace that, right? So at any certain point of time in the future, we must be able to, so we are able to estimate the potential surpluses and shortages with the plan, with the HR plan. When we have a very good HR plan, so we can estimate the potential problems of surpluses and deficits. So that's another objective to achieve from HR planning. And to forecast the future requirements. Another objective, to forecast the future requirements, to estimate surpluses or deficits of people, right? So it is something like it is similar to the previous one, the forecast future requirements, and to cope with changes, because as we know, so environment is always subjected to the change. Environment is always subjected to change. So in that case, we can cope, let's say, when we have a proper flexible HR planning, HR plan, so we can arrange, we can adjust the plan or the human requirement according to the environmental changes. So we had a Saharan attack and we had a COVID, right? So when, if we could have a very good HR plan, so we would be able to adjust the number of people requirement according to the business needs, right? So for example, due to the, if you take a hotel industry, during the 2023 period, 2022 period, so we had a huge cut of employees, number of reduction of huge number of employee reduction. So in some cases, some hotels had to close down with the inability of maintaining or paying their salaries for their full-time employees, because all of the employees were recruited, joined or employed based on the permanent full-time basis, right? In that case, in a sudden case of market collapse, a crisis, how can we maintain, how can we pay the salaries for them, right? So when, because according to the, we have labor law, right? According to the labor law, once employees are employed based on the full-time permanent basis, they must be paid salaries. They must be paid, right? But how can you pay the salaries without businesses, right? So the same situation is facing nowadays by the organizations, right? Especially the government factories, government industries, government institutions, not government, government, ready-made garments, those who are producing ready-made garments, right? So all of them are permanent full-time, but these days the main burden that the garment factories are facing are not receiving sufficient orders from the Western countries, from the buyers. So then one particular, if you take one particular garment, there are nearly more than 2,000, 4,000, 10,000 employees. So how we can maintain that much of employees without having proper business? So the only thing they can do is closing down the factory, right? But if you have any very good plan, HR plan, so that has a very good mechanism to replace people, or in the times of in the hard times, there is a good mechanism to reduce people. In the good times, there is a very good mechanism to attract more people, right? So that must be reflected by the HR plan. In the hard times, so we must have a proper plan to reduce people immediately without violating any labor legislations, right? So, but when you recruit the employees on full-time permanent basis, how can you reduce the number of people significantly in the times of difficult times, right? So that's the very good HR manager's requirement. So we require very good talented, very good HR manager to do all these stuffs in the times of in the difficult times. So our HR plan must be adjusted according to the time that we are running, or maybe according to the current situation. So if you are facing a difficult time without having sufficient businesses, in that case, we must be able to reduce the number of people significantly according to the business demands. So in that case, we don't have to maintain excess number of people. So we always balance the number of people according to the business demands, right? According to the business demand. That is a derived demand. Derived demand in the sense that we demand people according to the business demands. So if the business demands are very high, then we demand people more. If the business demands are very low, we are running in a difficult time. In that case, we must be able to reduce the number of people required significantly. So we need to have a flexible workforce, right? So that's that can be done with the very good HR plan. So coping with changes, right? So due to there may be environmental changes due to competitive forces, market forces, technology, product development, government regulations, environmental sudden cases, right? So always we know that the environment is subject to changes. Due to these changes, business opportunities may be changed, and business threats will be there. And to those, we will have to meet them, right? So in order to cope with these changes, HR plan, we must have a very good HR plan. And also we need to maintain, another objective is to maintain the output and productivity levels. Without people, how can we maintain our output levels? Let's say, for example, we need 100 people, but we are having only 20 people in our organization. Then how can we? There is a 80 people shortage. So then without 80 people, how can we do that? Do our businesses, do our business operations, right? So then we lose our opportunities, business opportunities. Maybe sometimes that opportunity may be attracted by the competitor. So the competitor may get the advantages of having not having sufficient number of people to us, because we don't provide sufficient enough business opportunities, business demands. In that case, a competitor maybe grab that opportunity. So maintain the output and productivity levels. So in order to maintain the business demands, we must have a sufficient number of people. And to work out employee development programs. And HR, not only the business requirements, but also the employee requirements must be met by the HR plan. Right. Suppose that you join the organization as a clerk, junior executive, right? So the HR plan must reflect your development. After 10 years time, you must be able to, let's say, to be the senior manager of that company. So there is a development plan along with the HR plan, right? After first year, how you can promote it. And after second year, how you can promote it. And for each and every employee, the development plan must be incorporated into the HR plan. So career development plan is there in the HR planning, right? So therefore, another objective is to work out employee development program. So there must be a proper mechanism that reflects how the current employees are developed, right? Through the plan. That must be reflected in the plan. And so once that is done in the HRM human resource planning, then employee relationships are then strengthened. So therefore, to establish good employee relations, is another objective. Establishing good employee relations is another objective. And also reduce labor cost, because when you HR plan, always make sure the HR balance, not having any HR imbalance in the sense that without a shortage or without a surplus, right? Imbalance simply means that imbalance is a shortage or a surplus, right? So balance simply means that you don't have any HR surplus or any HR shortage for any certain point of time. So when you have a excess of employees, you need to pay more salaries to those who are in excess, and those who are in maybe in being idle, redundant. They don't do any job, uh, but they must be paid, right? It's a cost. And also in case of a shortage, uh, we have more business demands, but no people to get them done. Then again, we are losing business opportunities. Again, a cost, right? So, but when we have a proper HR plan, we can avoid that surplus cost and shortage cost both. Right, same thing repeated here. Then HR planning process, HRP process. So initially we need to analyze current plans and objectives. We need to look at what will be our plans and what are our plans for the 5 years. What will be our strategic objectives according to our corporate plan. So we need to look at that first. Then based on that, convert those objectives into HR plans, human resource objectives. And then based on that, forecast HR needs, then estimate the current supply, then comparing demand and supply, and evaluate the HR planning effort, right? So those are the steps to be followed in HR plan. In order to make a plan, these are the steps to be followed. And I will give you an assignment based on this, and carefully listen these things, and you will be able to prepare a report that must be submitted at the end of this course, because you must learn all these HR functionalities. Even though this assignment is given at the very first, at the end of today's session, I will give you the assignment, and so you need to basically prepare a report on HR planning for a selected organization, and that must be submitted at the end of the course, right? So you have enough time to do that. So once, because there are so many other HR functionalities to be done, the other lecturers will do, and myself again will do another 4 sessions. And based on all these sessions about what you have obtained from all these lectures, then you can simply make a plan, right? Okay, HR planning process done. Then first one, analyzing organizational objectives and plan. Check what are the organizational objectives, right? What are the main vision, mission, and future strategic plans you need to look at. You need to check the strategic objectives or strategic plan or corporate plan. So that is normally prepared for 5 years. According to literally that is normally prepared for the 5 years, coming 5 years, and you need to look at that first. What are the corporate objectives, right? The main objective of HR planning is to match the employee abilities into the enterprise objectives, right? So the main emphasis is the future, is on the future, right? So plan is to focus the future. Therefore, you need to you need to look at the corporate plans, and those plans need to be converted into the manpower objectives. How we can do that? Suppose in order to achieve the corporate objective, what should be the HR objectives? Right? So let's say you selected, you got a point about about the corporate objective, vision and mission. You understood. You referred them, and you understood what will be the position after 5 years. What will be the company's position after 5 years, and what they want to achieve. and where they want to be, right? So let's say, for example, increase the market share by 5%, right? So that's the corporate objective. Then what will be the HR objectives? What will be the HR objective? Because that increase in the market share by 5% need to be converted as HR objective, because the only logic behind this is so the corporate objective is performed, executed by the people, right? So market share increase is done by people. So then market share, uh, uh, increase of market share by 5% ultimately performed by, executed by the people. That's why we need to convert that 5% of market share increase need to be converted into a manpower objective, right? So how we can do that? Because we are currently performing maximum. Our target in the next coming 5 years is to increase 5%. For example, we are having only 100 people now, right? With the 100 people, we are performing 20% market share. We are targeting, we are catering to only 20%. In the coming 5 years, we are going to increase by 5%, right? After 5 years, our target is to have 25% market share. Then can we do with 100 people? Can we go to, can we achieve that 5% more with 100 people? Obviously, we need more people to cater some more market share, right? Otherwise, the existing employees need to work overtime, right? So therefore, in order to increase the market share, people will be, more people will be needed to have that. So in that case, how we can convert, let's say, increase the recruitment by 2%, for example. Increase the recruitment is an HR objective in achieving the 5% market share. Let's say, increase the sales workforce by 5%. Sales workforce by 5%. So once the sales workforce increased, so that will ultimately contribute to increase the market share, because they are the people who do the more sales, right? So therefore, increase the sales workforce by 5% or 10%. Percentage is immaterial. That's depending on the current workforce, right? So so we need to have a rough estimate the number of percentage of people required. Let's say, for example, let's say we need 2%, right? So recruiting 2%, 2 additional percent of sales workforce during in the coming 5 years is an HR objective, right? Sometimes, so let's say with the current crisis, people are, migrating. Assume that these days, a month, 10 employees leaving, right? While recruiting 2% of employees, 10% having a 10% of labor turnover. What will happen? So when you plan to recruit 2% additional employees, existing employees are leaving by 10%. So again, we have a shortage. Then we need to have another mechanism to retain the current employees in the organization, right? So HR manager can be given a target, reduce the labor turnover by 10%. So 10% leaving, then in the coming, during the coming year ahead, or during the in the coming 5 years, right? So normally yearly, a year, 10% employees are leaving. So then HR manager can be given a target to reduce up to a 0% a year. Another HR objective, reduce the labor turnover, reduce the LTO. LTO is the labor turnover. Turnover simply means that the number of people leaving the organization, number of current employees leaving the organization in a given point of time. Right? How we calculate that? Number of left employees divided by total employees multiplied by 100. So then you get the labor turnover rate. The simply means that number of people who left the organization during a certain time period, right? So LTO is reduced by 2%, for example, is another HR objective, and increase the KSA. KSA simply means knowledge, skills, and attitudes of employees. Let's say, for example, you think that as HR manager, Salesforce training, further training is needed in order to increase sales. Then HR department can be given a target to increase the Salesforce awareness, capacity, knowledge, attitude by certain percentage, right? So you simply given a target. Another objective, increase the sales force capacity during this coming 5 years period. Current employees increase in the capacity, competencies, right? Knowledge, skill, attitudes, and other characteristics which are required to increase sales, for example. Right? Another HR objective. So those are the HR objectives. So simply converting corporate objectives into manpower objectives. In other words, HR objectives are those, right? So if we are targeting to increase 5% market share, then in that case, that must be converted into a manpower objectives. Simply, we can give a target. HR department can be given a target to increase the overall performance of the organization increase by 5%. Performance, each and every individual can be given a KPI. So which is sometimes somewhat increased than the current. Let's say each and every employee given a target of 1% increase for increase of performance by each year. Each and every employee is given a 1% increase of performance for each year. So then obviously 5 years, each employee maintaining 5% performance increase. Right? Suppose, for example, currently we are having 100 employees. For each and every employee is given a target to increase their performance only by 1% per year. So then at the end of the 5 years, obviously the company achieved the 5 years target, the 5 performance target, 5% performance, 5% performance increase target. Right? For example, suppose your school wants to become the best school in Sri Lanka. So the school that we were talking about at the very beginning, at the very first slide, right? So suppose this is the corporate objective. This is the vision of the organization, vision of the school that we were talking about. Then what will be the HR objectives of that school? What will be the HR objectives of that school? Because school wants to become the best school in Sri Lanka. So that's the corporate objective. Then what will be the HR objective? So one HR objective is to recruit the best teachers in the island. To recruit the best teachers in the island. So then obviously, after 10 or 20 years, it automatically becomes the best school in Sri Lanka. Because we have best teachers in the island or in the world, for example. We want to recruit, we must try our best to recruit best teachers. Then obviously, the students' performance will be very high, will be best. Right? So that's Corporate objective is to become the best school. HR objective is to attract best teachers in the world. Right? So that's how we can convert the corporate objective into a manpower objective. Then third step is forecasting future HR needs. Demand forecasting, in other words. HR, in the HR planning process, the third one is the forecasting future HR needs. Demand forecasting, in other words. How we can do that? Based on the previous one, and you can determine how many people that will be required for the coming 5-year period. So this involves estimating the types and numbers of employees needed for the future. Right? Types and numbers. Types in the sense that which types, maybe how many executives needed, how many managers needed, how many clerks needed, how many accountants needed, how many managers needed, how many, let's say, engineers needed. Types, different jobs types, according to your organization. And the numbers, right? So this is done based on the organizational plans and future corporate objectives, corporate plans. Factors affecting demand for human resources means variables which may increase or reduce the demand. Factors affecting demand. Demand for what? Demand for businesses that the organization is engaged in. Right. So what are the factors considered for demand forecasting? Right. So demand forecasting in the sense that HR demand forecasting, human resource demand forecasting, right? Human resource, what are the factors? The main factor is the derived demand. Derived demand is in the sense that the goods and services demand, right? For example, if we are catering, let's say we are producing garments. Now we have received many orders from the buyers from, let's say, Western countries. So in that case, we can't meet those demands, right? Without having sufficient number of people. Then when we have more demand for our goods and services, more orders, more people. More orders in the sense that more undertakings, more business opportunities, then more people will be needed. But in that case, the vice versa of that, if you have low business opportunities, low business demands, low people will be needed. Lower number of people, very few number of people will be required. Right? So, so that is the main factor is the goods demand, goods and service demand. That is a direct impact. And the second one is objectives and strategic plans of the business. So let's say, as I told you, in the strategic plan of the organization, strategic corporate plan of the organization, corporate plan reflects the 5% increase in the market share in the coming 5 years. So in that case, obviously we need 5% more people, maybe 10% more people. So we need to increase the number of people that we have, right? So basically currently we have 100 employees. We must have, let's say 150 people. So we need to increase the number of people. Another factor for demand forecasting. And changes in the production methods. Sometimes we are planning to go for the automation. So in that case, all the manually done works are now planning to be done by automation. So in that case, machineries are replaced by the people. Basically, let's say, machineries are replaced for the people. Right? In that case, no people will be needed. So then in that case, significantly number of people required can be minimized or reduced. Let's suppose the other side of that, right? So companies planning to go for the manual method, conventional methods. In that case, more people will be needed, right? So now there is a trend that the car manufacturing is going to be handmade, right? So if you take, for example, Vega, Sri Lanka, now it's not done in automation, right? So in that case, we need more people. Then retirements, resignations, leaves, absence, sudden deaths, terminations, all these create vacancies. And vacancies, in order to fill the vacancies, obviously we need more people, right? External factors such as economic, political, social, technical, and legal forces, right? For example, government recently imposed a law which prescribed the retirement age. Let's say, for example, government increased the retirement age. Earlier, a female retired at 50 and male retired at 55. So if the government, suppose that if the government increased that age range up to by 5 years, let's say male 60, female 60, male 65. So in that case, we don't want people. So we have enough people, right? So likewise, economic conditions like crisis. In a crisis, we don't have sufficient businesses, right? We don't have sufficient income generated through sales. Then we don't want people. We can ask them to stay at home, or we can terminate, or we can close down the business, right? So that's, and political and social, technical, all these things, right? Environmental forces create the demand for people, right? So those are the factors to be considered for demand forecasting, right? So suppose we forecasted our demand based on these factors. Then there, apart from that, so there are techniques for demand forecasting, right? So how we can do that, forecast the demand? There are mathematical techniques and there are subjective and objective techniques, right? So we will discuss a few of them. One is techniques for demand forecasting, informal forecasting. Informal forecasting, that is the easiest method, and future demand is determined without systematic base, and it is done quickly and randomly based on the experience of the HR managers and the other manager and the other board of managers. Simply, for example, based on the experience of the marketing manager, so marketing manager can determine, according to the corporate plan, marketing manager can determine the number of people needed for the coming 5 years. The accountant or the chief financial officer can determine the number of people required for the coming 5 years based on his or her experience and according to the corporate plan, right? So likewise, basically the organization themselves, the top management, board of management, determine the number of people required, and that is communicated to the corporate CEO. And CEO decides whether how much, how many number of people recruited or not. Right. So that is the easiest method. Normally, small organizations apply. And apart from that, instead, we can use formal expert estimating. Formal expert estimating. Demand is estimated by conducting a survey among experts. Experts in the sense that formally, for example, expert are normally the managers, maybe HR consultant for the company, maybe the senior managers, board of managers, right? call for an interview, and so HR manager can act as the moderator, and so they can plan, they can determine the number of people required according to the corporate plan, and so that's a formal discussion, right? Conducting a survey among the experts, and help is obtained from the respective department heads. How many need to you this year? How many people needed to you in the sense that the respective department head is asked how many people will be needed according to maintain according to the business requirements, according to the demands raised by the organization or raised by the each respective department. Right. So questionnaires, sometimes discussions, interviews can be used to collect the data. Maybe sometimes if meeting is not called, in that case, for example, the formal questionnaire is distributed among the senior board of managers and ask them how many number of people required. So then they fill the questionnaire and send it to the HR department. So likewise, or else we can call for an interview, call for a meeting. Then in that case, formally have a discussion on how many people required for the future based on the corporate plan reflections. Right. So interviews, these are the methods of collecting data. So a set of questions for an expert survey. So these are the questions that can be asked in a questionnaire or a discussion or an interview from each and every expert. Expert are the department heads sometimes. Is there a significant increase for a good or service being produced by your department? If so, do you need to increase employees? What types of employees and how many? Right? So we can ask this question from the marketing department. We can ask this question from the production department. Right? So do you have new plans to expand or close or reduce your business? As a result, what type of employees do you need to increase or reduce, and how many? Do you have plans to introduce new technologies to do your business? What are they? Are there implications for increasing or reducing employee requirements? So all these questions have handy answers to determine by which we can determine the number of people. So this is a formal expert estimate. And there are some other questions. You can simply go through that. So all these questions ultimately helpful for determining the number of people required for each and every department. And so HR department can act as the moderator and finally determine the number of, based on the estimates coming from different departments, HR department can have a rough estimate about how many people required for the entire organization for the coming, let's say, 5 years. Right? So based on the answers given by the experts to these questions. Right. Then we have another technique called Delphi technique. Right? So this is a special kind of a survey. It is more sophisticated than formal expert survey. Right? So this is someone formal than the expert formal survey. And sometimes it is basically sophisticated, complicated than the formal expert survey. Right? So 5 steps need to be followed in this technique. Right? For example, an issue, a question, or a problem is identified. For example, the main problem is to, let's say we are going to open a new branch in, let's say our corporate objective, corporate plan reflects the vision or mission of, or the main goal of achieving 5% market share in the coming 5 years, right? So that's the issue. That's the question, or that's the problem. A small group or panel of 10 or fewer experts are identified. So the main problem is how we can recruit people and how many number of people need to be recruited in order to meet our strategic plan in the for the 5 years, coming 5 years. So that's the issue. Then a small group or panel of 10 or fewer experts are identified, right? So who are they? Who may be they? Let's say HR manager is there, HR manager must be there, and all other board of directors, board of managers, senior managers, senior management team is there, must be there, right? So those people are the normally small group panel. Independent judgments about the issue are obtained from each expert through a questionnaire or a structured interview. An intermediary or a facilitator collects, analyzes, and feedback information from the first questionnaire or interview to each expert. Steps 3 and 4 are repeated until there are consensus on the issue or a problem. Right? So how we can do that? For example, so let's say these people are the experts, right? Let's say HR manager acts as the moderator, right? So then marketing manager is called for the interview, and chief financial officer called for the interview, and CEO is asked to come to the interview, come to the discussion, and maybe HR consultant is asked to come to the discussion, and maybe let's say key suppliers are asked to the discussion, maybe buyers or the key stakeholders, like the main buyers of the company, main product buyers. Then let's say labor, in order to represent the government, let's say, or the company's bankers, outside expert are asked to come, or maybe a stockholder, or maybe key chairman of the company may be asked to come, right? So so these are the small group, right? So then issue is presented to them individually, right? Independent from one another. For example, no one knows the other one's prediction. Let's say individually contact this person by the HR manager and present the problem and present the corporate plan. As a chairman, he knows very well about the current strategic plan, and an issue is presented. Issue is how many people will be required in order to meet these objectives reflected in the corporate plan, right? So then he says, we need 100 people. So the same thing process done to him as well. He says 150, right? He says 300. He says 500, right? He says 80 people, right? He says, let's say 100. Then there is a disagreement. So there different people giving different opinions. So which does not have a rough similar amount of number of people. So then in that case, again, so since there are huge variations among the individual differences, individual predictions, obviously the HR manager can go for the second round by, revealing, by explaining, by clarifying the problems, and by explaining more detail, giving them more detailed explanations on the future plans and all these stuffs. So then again, the same process can be run for the second time, right? So then he says, then we need 150 people, right? So he says, then again, we need 140 people. So likewise, until we get a rough amount, which is almost similar by the predictions given by all of them. So this process must be repeated by several times until we get a rough amount by each and every rough similar amount, approximate amount of prediction by each and every individual in this panel. Right? So this is known as Delphi technique. Right? Sometimes the number of rounds running may be 5 to 10 maybe. Right? So maybe more than that sometimes. So until we get a rough amount, similar amount given by each and every expert, this number of interweaving conducting rounds can be varied, right? Until we get a rough amount. So therefore, so that is done. That is normally called as the Delphi technique. Then unit demand forecasting, another technique, right? So unit demand simply means that this, let's say we have the organization structure. Right? So these are the units, divisions or departments, right? So we have different departments. We have subordinates. These two subordinates are coordinated by this department head, and this is a department head, and he has two subordinates, and these two subordinates are coordinated by this department head, and all the people are coordinated by the CO, right? So these are the people. The circle denotes the people or the employee, right? So here, so this department is led by this person, right? He is the supervisor, he is the department head. So he knows very much about the human resource requirements for the coming year or 5-year period according to the demands, according to this department's demands, right? So basically, he is asked to predict the human resource requirements. He, according to his experience and the demands for his department, so he predicts, let's say, one more employee, right? So he has another department, and he is having another 2 employees, and he is asked to predict the number of people required for a certain time period. And he says he need 2 more people, right? 2 more people. So then altogether, how many people? These 2 people are led by this person. Then this department requires how many people? 1, 2, 3. 3 people are predicted by this department. And he thinks that he need another sub-department. Need to employ 2 more people. Then altogether, how many? 5 people needed. Right? So likewise, each predictions, different predictions coming from different sections. Likewise, let's say from he determines 1 employee needed, and he determines 2 more employee needed, and he determines, let's say, another 1 employees needed under him, right? So altogether he 1, then 2, then 1, so 4 people needed, right? So this prediction, this estimate is passed to the top immediate supervisor, and immediate supervisor again do a rough estimate about what he needs and how many number of people needed, and he pass his estimate to his immediate supervisor. And likewise, finally, the estimate comes to the CO. And CEO determine, because CEO is the one who run the business and who is the leader of the entire business, and he can determine he can decide whether this prediction is adjusted or fine-tuned, refined. Let's say how many people altogether needed? 9 people. So this manager says 4 people needed, and this manager says 5 people needed altogether. Then these two predictions are passed to the above level, top level. Then ultimately, CEO is having a prediction of 9 people requirement. So then, as the top of the as the leader of the organization, he can adjust this at each level. Each leader of each level can adjust the estimate or the prediction coming from the down, right? For example, he's this manager says one person is needed. This manager says 2 people are needed, right? And these two predictions are communicated or passed to the upper level. And this manager thinks that because he is the one who supervises entire department, entire sections, right? So then he has the knowledge about all the business requirements. Then he can adjust this prediction. Let's say the original estimate came from down was 4. Now he is in the position to determine or adjust this figure. Let's say he, according to his knowledge, he thinks that 1 more needed to add, and he make the estimate as 5. Right? So likewise, each department head can adjust the estimate which is coming from down, and that estimate, that adjustment can be communicated to the upper level, and each level head can adjust the estimate which is coming from down, right? So likewise, this is the final estimate, and this can be adjusted by the CEO, and he thinks that 9 is too much, so we don't have sufficient budget to accommodate 9. So then we can cut down 1 employee, and finally we can conclude that we need to 8 people need to be recruited. Or maybe sometimes not 9 is not enough. We are going to open a branch in Bangladesh as well. Then 10 more people are needed for that branch. Then altogether 19 people are needed. So this final decision is made by the CEO. So this is known as unit demand forecasting. Right? So this is known as unit demand forecasting. So those are the methods by which we can determine the number of people required. Right. So we have another technique, trend projection. So forecast is based on the trend projection. For example, a company can make 1 million sales using 10 salespersons. Then ratio is 1 million to 1. If the next year's sales forecast is 2 million, company need additional 10 salespersons. So likewise, this kind of a prediction can be done. To manufacture 100 units, 1 operator is needed. Another example, to manufacture 200 units, then another 1 more operator is needed. So therefore, altogether 2 people will be needed. So likewise, we can determine this type of, we can use this type of predictions. There are so many other predictions are there, but basically we can discuss these things. Right, assessing the current HR supply. So we can do it, I think, after the break. If you need a break, we can give a 5 minute, 10 minutes, so 20 minutes break. Then after that, we can continue.